I am Sarah Lepper. I am a junior communication studies major here at FDU. And I personally like the sustainability development goals because they provide a clear-cut path forward for our society to improve our global experience together. So here we have Serene with us. Lauren, would you like to read her bio?
Sure. So my name is Lauren Arroyo. I'm an English Lit major with double minors in creative writing and screenwriting here at FDU. And today we have a special guest. Her name is ANYANGO NYAMORI, founder of the Sustainability in Africa. ANYANGO is an ardent advocate for growing young minds and believing that children and youth are the best agents of change. A facilitator and development practitioner by training, she has worked extensively spanning over a decade with private sector, government, and civil society. Her areas of specialty include design thinking, sustainable development, transformational leadership, corporate social responsibility, organizational development, behavior change, gender and development, coaching, mentorship, and social impact management. She is the founder of Sustainability Africa, a social impact organization that engages young people to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, in their activities and shape their thinking towards taking a positive action in response to climate change. Recognized for her efforts in leadership, youth, and women empowerment, ANYANGO was awarded as a 2015 UN Habitat Youth Mentor, where she mentors youth-led organizations around the world and helps them to become citizens in their communities and bring about global change. She is also a 2011 Morimi Initiative Leadership and Empowerment Development Fellow, a leadership award honored to a selected African woman who have demonstrated leadership and academic promise, interest in youth, women, and human rights, economic development, and a record of accomplishment in community service. ANYANGO holds a certificate in African Sustainable Leadership, Strathmore University Business School, Executive Masters in Organization Development, United States International University, Africa, and Bachelor of Arts in Development Studies. Her personal mission is to serve as a transformational African woman change engineer, generating innovative ideas and practical solutions to address pressuring sustainability challenges in Africa. ANYANGO simply describes herself as an African who loves all African things. So whenever you're ready.
I will start your presentation by asking you 2 questions. So first, what inspired you to launch Sustainability Africa?
Well, looks like we have, if we had a whole day, I'd start, but I'd say initially, I noticed that African countries were over-reliant on donor funding coming in from the West. And that really frustrated me because this donor funding came with stringent measures. So depending on the leader in the West, what the agenda was is what the African agenda would be. So that means our issues were not being solved. So I'll give you an example. If leader X is pro-HIV AIDS, and so any organization or community-based organization that is addressing HIV AIDS issues will get the funding. So if leader Y comes into power and they are into governance, so they'll fund pro-governance organizations. So what happens to the HIV AIDS and other organizations that are addressing other issues that are pressing in Africa? They either close down, or the ones that are slightly smart would change their, change their objective. And so we're not solving anything by doing that. So I thought, well, looking at my environment, I saw that we have a very vibrant private sector that could actually contribute, that have a corporate social responsibility budget that could contribute effectively to solving, to funding these local organizations. I also recognize that we have a large population of youth. Actually, Kenya has about 61% of the country is, we have young people, and they're the most affected in this local and global challenges. And young people own over 80% of the small, medium enterprise businesses who actually need this particular funding. So with all that, I thought, well, isn't it about time we started solving our own problems? Yes, it's good to build a relationship with the donors, but it was becoming an over-reliance. And I think just changing that mindset where we can enable ourselves to start solving, getting innovative, creating innovative solution to solving our own problems. And that's actually how I founded Sustainability Africa.
That's a great story, and it's always good to have a woman in charge, I will say.
Thank you.
COVID-19 has paralyzed economies around the world. How will your organization support Kenya to facilitate an inclusive and sustainable recovery? And how will you mobilize and empower youth to take action?
Wow, okay. So first of all, I'm happy you've asked that, because that's something that we're actually dealing with right now. Youth, it's important that we noticed that as well, that youth are rarely, they're the most affected when it comes to a lot of challenges, global or local. And so it's important for us that we lend our voice to public policy issues addressing COVID-19 pandemic and the youth. So a lot of issues in public policy usually affect youth, but youth are rarely involved. So we're advocating for the involvement of youth in public policy. That's one thing we're doing, lending our voice to actually start contributing. Another thing that we're doing is to build cross-cultural collaboration with public and private sector institutions. And why are we doing this? Because we intend to incubate, coach, mentor youth-led in technology-driven innovative solutions. So the youth have solutions towards addressing challenges that SDGs challenges, but they don't have a capital really could be an issue, because that we could expose them to, introduce them to donors and venture capitalists and all that. But the bigger challenge usually is that they don't have the ability to scale their businesses and to transform their ideas into actionable, innovative solutions. So that's another thing we're doing. And lastly, we also, one of our programs, SDGs for SMEs, we're expanding it to start again training youth-led businesses on creative problem-solving skills. So that is a gap in Africa. So we are creative problem-solving skill is not something that we learn in school. So we're hoping to do that so that the SMEs and the social enterprises and the startups that have been started by youth can actually survive longer than the proverbial five-year period. And so we are also hoping that through that, we'll be able to help them to build sustainable business models that in future would be able to address further pandemics. I don't think that COVID is the last pandemic we're going to have. But if the youth, if the SMEs are prepared, then that means that in the future, if they have sustainable business models, they'll have the capacity to withstand future coming pandemics.
Great, thank you. If you would like to proceed with your presentation, you can do that now.
Yes, please. Okay, so thank you very much. I see the presentation is here. So I'll start in Africa. So could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. Africans love telling stories. So we use storytelling to pass on experiences, knowledge, and values from one generation to the other. So today, and I'm happy to be part of to be part of this session, I would like to request your audience as I share a story about a king that was told to me by my grandmother. So in the village of Kano is in Western Kenya. It's Western Kenya. There lived a great king called Tello. Tello means a leader in Western Kenya. So the king's responsibilities included, and he had to ensure the security of his people. He had to make sure that there was enough food and water for the people in his kingdom. He had to increase the wealth. Part of his responsibility was also to increase the wealth and trade of the kingdom. He also needed to ensure that he's building good relationships and maintaining peace with other kingdoms. Another responsibility that he had was protecting the kingdom's land and surrounding waters and taking care of the poor, among many other things. So basically, he had quite a number of responsibilities, as you can see. However, among all these things that he had to do, his greatest responsibility was to ensure that whatever he does not and will not compromise the kingdom's resources. But even more importantly, that he prepares his son to take the reign after he is gone. And his son will do the same, and so on and so forth. So, as my grandmother told me, the king does not live for himself. Every day he's alive, he lives for his son and future generations. His mindset is not on how much he can accumulate, but how best he can leave the kingdom for his son. And his son takes over the same mindset. How best can I leave the same kingdom for my son and other future generations? So what are we getting from this story? Sustainability of the kingdom begins with the king, or with him. So I'm just going to throw in a rhetoric question. So let's say you're the king. What are you currently doing to stay sustainable? What actions are you currently doing? These really small actions, and you can type them out if you'd like, but just think about it. Just take a few seconds and think about it. What are you currently doing for sustainability? What are you currently doing as a young person to progress the case for sustainable development in your local community, in your school environment, in your family? So as you're thinking about it, there are things you can do. Are you switching off the lights when you don't need them? Or do you just leave the lights on because you have them? Are you turning off a leaking tap, perhaps, to save water? Are you throwing the trash in the correct bin? Are you separating your trash? Are you probably using less plastic, recycling, reusing items when you can? And why am I saying this? Because these are simple things. We don't need to start a huge organization. And I keep, when I talk to young people, I tell them, you don't need to start a huge organization to be sustainable or to make your impact. Impact begins with this very small things that you do. And those small things end up changing the world and your community as well. So ultimately, sustainability begins with you. You cannot change the world if you cannot change yourself. And yes, as we continue, so thank you very much. Next slide, please. So the objective of this session, as we continue, is to, at the end of this session, we hope that we will, the objective of this session is to encourage youth to develop their own ways of contributing to sustainable development at the local, national, regional, and global levels. And what do we say? Everyone, everywhere. No one should be left, and WIS is not going to be left behind. So I like to tickle every time I have a presentation, I like to tickle young minds. So I'll give you a short quiz, and I just want to see what you know. This is just a worldview quiz, and you don't really have to think about it. It's literally just look at the question, it's A, B, C, and answer whatever, just type it out. So the first question is, in all low-income countries across the world today, how many girls finish primary school? So option A is 20%, option B is 40%, option C is 60%. Interesting. You can see B's, A's. Great. The correct answer is option C. Shocking, right? Yes. So you'd be shocked that, and this is actually UN statistics. So if you go to the UN website, you'll find that in low-income countries, 60% of girls actually finish primary school. And that means that there's actually progress in terms of girl-child education. When I was younger, lots of my grandmothers never went to school. But over the past few decades, we have more girls going to school than we did in the last 30 or 40 years. So there is progress. It may not be recognizable now, but there actually is progress. And so that's interesting. Let's try the second one. So in the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in poverty has A, almost doubled, B, remained more or less the same, C, almost halved. Okay, that's for question 2. I see C, 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 B. Okay, so again, if you wrote C, then you got it this time. In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has actually almost halved. And I got this, you'll notice if you do a lot of research, if you get into the UN documents and you look at their reports and you read their reports, and you recognize that there's a lot of work being done for people living in extreme poverty. And that extreme poverty is not the same as it was in the 60s or in the 70s. People now have access to water. Most developed countries or developing countries actually have access to electricity or other sources of electricity. There's access to education. And these are indicators of communities living or of communities and governments and countries actually getting away from extreme poverty. The fact that we have access to education, access to healthcare. Of course, it's not necessary. I wouldn't say that it's perfect, but at least there is access to some of these amenities. So the population of people living in extreme poverty has indeed almost halved. Thank you. Next question. Just have 4 of them. Let's see. I'm enjoying this. I hope you are. Okay, so this one, how many, where did that go? How did the number of deaths per year from natural disasters change over the last 100 years? More than doubled, remained about the same, decreased to less than half. The number of deaths. All right. Okay. So yet again, the number of deaths per year from natural disasters actually decreased to less than half. So I guess this is becoming, now you're seeing that there's actually a lot of progress, or there's little progress, or whatever progress that there is in terms of global challenges. And this one, I guess, is this is a free point. So global climate experts believe that over the next 100 years, the temperature will get warmer, remain the same, or get colder. Okay, I see we're all in agreement that it's A. So what if I asked you, and I probably don't have it in my slide, how many people in the world do you think have some access to electricity? 20% A, 50% B, 60% C. How many people in the world have some access to electricity? 20% A, 50% B, 60% C. Right. So that would be 60% C, and that's because with the new technologies that are coming up, a lot of governments are actually ensuring that a lot of developing governments are ensuring that they're meeting what we call the last mile, and especially in Africa, where everybody could at least have access to electricity or alternative sources of energy. So thank you very much for this. And so we can go to the next slide. So in one word, so please share one word that you would use to describe our planet in the year 2030. Just one word. How would you describe our planet in the year 2030? So we're in 2020, so how would you describe our planet in 2030? Toxic, threatened, thriving, hot, scarce, complex, extremely overcrowded. I've seen that in a movie somewhere. Hot, damaged, changing, progressing, no pollution. Thank you, Mikhail. Oh, wow, damaged, better, hot. Interesting. Controlled by technology. I've seen, I'm a fan of action movies and Tom Cruise movies where they actually project flying roads and all that. Interesting. Progressing, lazy, technology driven. Interesting. Very interesting. I'll get back to you on that one. So one word you use to describe your planet in the year 2030. Nice to know your thoughts, and we'll get back to your responses. So can we go next slide, please? So it is on this premise, projecting the state of the world in the future, whether it's hot, damaged, whatever, everything that we said, that global leaders met and agreed that we need to make our world a better place for all mankind. And that we need to leave a better world for future generations. And this is how the conversation towards the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, started. And it started from the Millennium Development Goals, which are 5-year goals. And the world leaders realized that there was more to be done. And so in 2015, they met and developed the Sustainable Development Goals, which is what we call the Vision 2030. So in 2030, here we are, saying that we will have a world control run by women, progressing, technology driven, a world with giant wasps, a world at crossroads, and all that. So let's see where we are. So let's moving on. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right. So let's look at the Sustainable Development Goals. So these are 17 goals that are intended to transform our world, and I'm sure most of us in this class identify with the SDGs. They were developed to improve the lives of the people worldwide, to promote prosperity while protecting the planet, and most importantly, to end all forms of poverty. So as you can see, the 17. So from the chart, you can see the 17 goals. So next slide, please. So we're living in a time of global uncertainty. And so we're talking about pollution, industrial pollution. We're talking about, we're looking at floods, uncontrolled weather patterns. We have droughts, and this is definitely parts of Africa. We have wildfires that we're seeing in North America, South America, areas in Canada, in I think in Los Angeles. Just basically, we have all these tragedies that are coming. And then we have the mother of them all, coronavirus. And so, so this is really an interesting time that we're living in. And I'd like to know, as we go through the next slide, please. So with all this, so we want to focus a little bit on COVID-19 and just look at what kind of challenges and opportunities that does COVID-19, the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic present. So I put a few, and if you feel the other challenges that the pandemic has presented that I haven't mentioned, please feel free to add onto the chat box. So we're seeing where COVID-19 has exposed weak health systems, and this is global, whether it's in Africa or in America or in Europe. We've seen that our health systems were challenged. There's been a surge in insecurity, of course, because of the lockdown and all that. We've seen a bit of poor governance. Interestingly enough, domestic violence. Cases that, yes, thank you for asking, what does child marriage?
Serene, do we lose you? Bear with me, everyone. It looks like we lost our presenter. Hold on a minute.
One of the challenges that we have experienced in Africa and many countries, and including my own in Kenya, is the disruption of education. And so there's been a decade-old and still continuing campaign to ensure that the girl child actually accesses, goes to school. So when girls don't go to school, they're they're at home in their communities. And because we are a largely cultural society, so back in the day, our culture, most African cultures actually marry girls off from the age of 13, 14, 15. And so with that, it means that as they're married off, then they won't be able to access education. They won't be able to access school, primary and secondary, and then probably go to college. So with the COVID pandemic, with the girls at home, we've seen a lot of them being married off, because then most communities have, have the opportunity to now marry off their girls. So that's a specific challenge to most African communities. Again, transportation was disrupted, and you can see with air travel, a lot of countries were on lockdown. We experienced as well financial vulnerabilities, disruption of economic and education sectors, like I've mentioned, and the ripple effect of these challenges as well. We always say for every challenge, there's an opportunity. So we have got to see, so what does COVID-19 virus have to do with climate change? Oh, great. I'll just answer this quickly. When there's less transport, so there's a less pollution in the air. So that means people are not traveling a lot. So the carbon emitted by cars and by planes is reduced. So that's how COVID-19, that's a relationship between COVID-19 and climate change. I hope I've answered your question, Levin. All right. So opportunities, manufacturing sector, we've got people who have been able to manufacture masks. So there's opportunities, especially where youth can get involved in. Technology sector, we've seen a lot of apps coming up, people developing apps on how to take care of yourself, wash your hands, and all that. The health sector as well, and the finance sector, because of the financial vulnerabilities, we have a lot of small financial institutions coming up to give loans to people with that. So these are some of the challenges and opportunities that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented. So what do we get from that slide? Is that, especially as young people, we need to look at challenges as opportunities to do these three things. One, to change lives. Two, to create impact. And my favorite one is to make money. Because why would I, to make money so that you can become sustainable. So any challenge that you have, and this is going on through this presentation, is that any challenge that you face is always a silver lining. There's always an opportunity where you can actually change lives, create impact, and make money. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see how youth are actually, youth in Africa, what they're doing to change lives, create impact, and make money by addressing global challenges, including the COVID-19 challenge. All right, so let's get into youth and the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is just a few facts. So youth constitute 16%, about 1.2 billion in the world, out of a population of about 7 billion. That means 16% of the global population is young people, is youth. We have 17 goals and 169 targets. And get this, there's no specific SDG with a strong focus on youth investment, youth rights, or youth participation. Now that's very interesting, out of the 17 SDGs that we looked at. Now, even more interesting is that more than a third of these targets actually pertain to youth. And we'll see which, in our next slide, we'll come and see which specific targets, or more than these targets that pertain to youth, even though there's no specific one. So what are we talking about? Look at poverty, goal 1, hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economy, reduced inequalities, and climate change. All these affect youth globally, whether in Africa, Europe, or in America. So as you can see, they affect youth, but now we're going, if you go to the next slide, let's see. Hello? Yes. So let's see now, let's just take a little brief look at youth in Africa. So Africa is considered the youngest continent in the world. And why is it considered the youngest continent? Because it has the largest population of youth in the world. It's also the fastest growing population and the largest concentration of young people, like I've said. There are approximately 420 million young men and women between 15 and 35 years in Africa today. And the number is set to double by 2050. Now, why is this data important? It's because the size of the youth population matters greatly in the context of sustainable development. Earlier in my presentation, I said that when I was introducing myself, I mentioned that youth have a great stake when it comes to solving our own problems in Kenya and basically in Africa, because we run youth run they own more startups are owned by youth and SMEs, and so they are the ones. Their size of the population greatly matters, and like I said again, I just want to reiterate that youth in Africa have a big stake on the SDGs, and if these youth are left out, the journey for achieving the global goals will be longer than expected. And we say Africa's greatest asset is its youth. All right, so let's look at some of the challenges that Africa's greatest assets is facing. So African youth continue to face a multitude of challenges. So I've listed quite a, I've tried to group them, and there's still more than what we can see. So limited opportunities in terms of unemployment. A lot of youth are educated, but there's unemployment and underemployment as well. There's also unequal education, which means that some people have access to education and some don't, or some have limited access to education for reasons could be that their schools are not facilitated enough and all that. So we also have poor governance as well in another challenge facing youth in Africa. is limited livelihood opportunities, violence and conflict. We're also facing corruption. Now, corruption isn't quite the issue, and I always say corruption happens, but our biggest challenge is impunity, where the people who are corrupt are not, do not face the consequences of their actions. And so there's corruption in the healthcare sector, where we have inadequate medical services, despite the fact that there are budgets for it. We have, of course, glaring poverty that we can see, and policy limitations, which do not involve the specific or the relevant stakeholders. So, how then can we, or you as young people, contribute towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals? I think more than ever right now, we need to start doing the first thing, which is to create awareness about the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development among youth. Part of the work we do is actually this, excuse me, creating awareness. You'd be shocked that a lot of people have no idea what the SDGs are, let alone how they can even begin to start contributing towards their development. So awareness is usually, and I say, it's the critical part. You can only solve what you know. So unless youth are aware that the SDGs, the 17 SDGs exist, that they will not have an opportunity to contribute towards achieving them. Secondly, we can, as young people, we could start we could co-design sustainable development initiatives. And by co-designing, we mean that we work together. You have an app, I have an idea. So we co-design initiatives that where we can be able to start solving some of these challenges that are directly affecting us as youth and affecting our communities. Importantly, we could also advocate for the protection of environment and promotion of sustainable livelihood. And you'll see how just advocating for the environment would solve quite a number of other issues. When I asked the question about what we see the world, what we view the world in 2030, a lot of us mentioned something related to the environment. So advocacy to the environment is critical to for youth as a contribution for youth towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's work with our numbers. Let's mobilize our peers. Bring one, each one. So you invite a friend, your friend invites another. So let's mobilize. Let's mobilize our peers to participate in the development of sustainable policies and youth programs. Let's encourage, apply our knowledge and creativity to innovate solutions that are essential for sustainable development. And finally, link with other youth organizations. So even if you don't have one, we don't need to all start youth organizations, but link with others across the globe. Link with organizations in India, link with organizations in Africa, and harness, harness all that energy, and leverage on the partnerships to actually solve most of these challenges. All right, back. Okay, we skipped a couple. Okay, that's fine. So I'll introduce you to Sustainability Africa. So we are a social impact organization that engages young people to adopt the SDGs in their activities and shape their thinking towards taking positive action in response to climate change. So our programs and initiatives are designed to enable us and our partners to contribute to the Global 17 SDGs and Kenya's Vision 2030. Our tagline is, "We choose to be part of the solution." Next slide, please. Well, as we're waiting for the slides to come, we'll see, yes. So I've just highlighted a few of our programs and what we do without a few of our programs that would be relevant for this session. So we have one of our programs called Set for Test. So we realized that a lot of young people, especially in rural schools, barely have access to a geometrical set, and only interact with it when they're doing the national exams. So these children who have never interacted with a geometrical set are expected to perform or to compete with other children who have that slight advantage. And so with this, we also recognize that built on that mathematics or math helps us think critically as well as build our analytical and problem-solving skills. And so if our student is empowered or enabled to solve mathematical problems, then that means they'll have the capacity to start solving their own community problems and find solutions about the world around them. So that's the purpose of math. So you're most likely not going to use your the formulas that you learned in the periodic table if that's what you do, but you're most likely to, math is meant to just stir your brain to be able to find, to solve problems. So what do we do here? We fundraise for geometrical sets annually, give them to the schools, distribute them rather to the schools, develop a system for them where after the candidates who have done the exams finished, they leave the geometrical sets in the schools, and then they're used by other students during the math session. So the teachers will come to the principal's office, get the number of geometrical sets that they need to teach the students. So what SDGs are we contributing to? We're contributing directly to SDG 4, which is quality education, and indirectly to SDG 8, because when the students get quality education, that means they'll have opportunity, they'll finish education and get some work. So that's SDG 8. When they have access to work and economic growth, then there'll be no poverty. When there's no poverty, there'll be no hunger. So those are the SDGs that we're contributing to indirectly. Our next program is, next slide, please. Greening Our Schools initiative. This is very close to my heart. So we work with, this program aims to help young people empower themselves to build a sense of ownership, responsibility towards environmental conservation and climate change. So how do we do this? We work with school communities to green their surroundings, behaviors, and attitudes. And we do this through planting trees, flowers, kitchen gardens where they can actually, feed themselves, and train them on environmental conservation and climate change. So the SDG that we contribute to directly is climate action, and indirectly we contribute to no poverty, because when you plant trees, trees can actually be a source of income. So when you have income, that means you're able to get off the poverty, you're reducing your poverty scale. When trees can also be a source of food, because then you have fruit trees, which now will also facilitate the SDG 2 of zero hunger. And then there are also medicinal trees that you could that we also plant that promote good health and well-being. Our last, the last program that I featured, we call it the SDGs for SMEs, for small medium enterprises, and these are basically startups. So 60% of youth-led startups and SMEs do not survive business challenges and risk to see the past 5-year mark. That's from the Central Bank of Kenya. So what do? We support SMEs and startups to integrate sustainability into their core business strategy and to develop practical solutions that can address the most pressing challenges in Kenya. So with this, we contribute directly to SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth. SDG 1, indirectly to no poverty, zero hunger, and good health and well-being. And for now, we probably will just watch this video and this is just a short video to just show you what young people, select young people in Africa are doing to solve local and global challenges. So thank you.
Those who cannot find a job try their own businesses. However, there are many youth and very often they try existing business ideas. But the market for existing products and services is often saturated. Therefore, one promising solution to tackle youth unemployment are the many opportunities in the emerging green sectors, which are innovative and not saturated, in which Africa has a competitive advantage in the global economy. In this video, we are visiting green entrepreneurs. We start in Eastern Nairobi, where we find EcoPost, and green enterprise started by Lorna Ruto.
EcoPost is involved in recycling plastic waste to manufacture very aesthetic, durable plastic lumber that has various applications. Our products can be used for fencing, for signposts, for building and construction, among various other products. It's like we're manufacturing trees. Basically, anything that would have otherwise been made out of timber, we can make out of our plastic lumber. There was a great opportunity as I started researching, and I saw that there's a lot of plastic waste. For example, Nairobi generates over 2,800 metric tons of waste every day. Kenya generates over 10,000 metric tons of waste, and then 20% of this is plastic. We have segmented our customers into three. We have the residents, we have the institutions, and we have the commercials. Residents include farmers and homeowners who use our poles for fencing, their farms and homes. So far, the major highways in Kenya are using our plastic lumber because as compared to metal, thieves normally steal metal and sell it back to scrap dealers. Our poles don't have any salvage value, so they're getting a lot of demand from the road sign companies.
Africa has the most untapped renewable energy resources in the world. Looking at the availability of sunshine, water, wind, and biomass, there is a competitive advantage of leapfrogging from a non-existent power infrastructure to decentralized renewable energy systems.
We wanted to do something different. So instead of going to buy the finished products, we went for the ideas that we could learn how to do the solar panels so that we can generate, energy that can be used in rural communities for lighting, for phone charging, and for other businesses like refrigeration and.
Okay. So as we conclude, just the last slide, Larry. Hello. Okay. So the final slide, just to conclude. So moving forward, the SDGs are ambitious. As you can see, there are 17 of them with 169 targets. They are inclusive. They include the youth, women, governments. So everyone is required to contribute, and they require an unprecedented mobilization of resources, leveraging of partnerships, and knowledge and skills. The implementation, however, can be accelerated when youth take cognizance of their local practices and appreciate how global events influence their action and progress on the implementation. All right, so finally, I'd say, the final slide, Larry, please. If we intend to achieve the SDGs by 2030, we need to at least do these three things. One, let us inspire one another to become active global citizens and advocate for sustainable development. Let us equip one another and ourselves with tools and information so that we're able, or we have the capability to develop key sustainable development competencies. And let us deliver local actions connected to the SDGs through community service and development projects. And with that, in Swahili, we say, asante sana. So I will welcome your questions. And yes, at Sustainability Africa, as always, we say be part of the solution, not the problem. So if you're part of the solution, you need to do something. So whatever little you can do, whether it's switching off the lights or turning off the taps, you're welcome to do so. So we'll welcome the question and answer session. I have taken one question, which is, let me see from the chat. Okay, great. We have something on corruption. So before corruption, there's one, yes. Why do you believe, what do you believe are the largest barriers to accomplishing the SDG 2030 goals? I think the first barrier is awareness. Beyond everything else is there's very little knowledge about the Sustainable Development Goals. I do a lot of training, and when I go to large organizations, very few organizations actually are even aware that they exist, which is really sad. So awareness is the first barrier. And then, so for those who are aware, there's very little government and private sector buy-in. So because the Sustainable Development Goals requires that you are open, requires, especially for private sector, requires that you are, that it requires an organization to be transparent and open with regards to their practices and human rights and how they treat their employees and what their impact is to the environment. So a lot of organizations do not want to release that information. So there's lack of government awareness and government buy-in and private sector buy-in. So I know we see like in Kenya, the companies, the only companies that I know have at least even have a sustainable development strategy are one telecom company, a few banks, and the rest are international organizations. So locally, a lot of organizations are still not, taking up the Sustainable Development Goals. We talked about, there's a question on corruption. And regarding the issue of corruption, why do you believe that corruption is not a large issue for Africans? In my opinion, we can donate all money in the world, but at the end of the day, it seems like it just ends up in the pockets of corrupt government officials in Africa. Thank you for the great presentation. Thank you very much. I said earlier, corruption is everywhere. Even in the US, in India, corruption is everywhere. The problem is impunity. So you look at countries like Japan that are if a government official is accused of corrupt dealings, they would rather, take their lives before they're sentenced by the government. So there are governments like that that are do not tolerate corruption. So most governments in Africa, even the people who have been accused, and it has been proven that they have they've been involved in corrupt activities, are never arrested or are never taken into action. So that's actually the challenge, is the impunity. So yes, so I hope that also answers your question. Let's look at the other one. Do you feel that there is buy-in and prioritization from the local government? There is, again, back to the challenge of awareness. So local governments as well, not quite, because a lot of local governments, there are lots of issues that they're dealing with. And so sustainability doesn't come as a priority when you have weak health systems and the education sector is struggling. So there's very little buy-in, and that's why a lot of awareness needs to be done. Question from we see, how do you facilitate the partnerships that make your program work, particularly when it comes to the co-design aspects of your programs? So some of the partnerships is, again, we network a lot. We try to be in spaces where people would be welcoming, would be open to listening to about matters sustainability, and this would be institutions and organizations that at least have an idea or have a sustainable report. So we attend those events to facilitate those partnerships. There's no better time to say it. We make sure that we are seen. We force our way into those events. We write them. We gently stalk them and tell them, look, we're young people. We're trying to advocate for sustainable development goals, and we believe that we can contribute to your agenda. So that's how we do it, and it has worked for us so far. And we also offer training sometimes at no cost, so that it may seem, or we get sponsorships of people to come and facilitate and help us facilitate the training. So basically, our work right now is a lot of advocacy and awareness to facilitate and to co-design aspects of our programs. How can FDU students gain internships with the organization? Oh, that would be wonderful. You can come in and help us a lot with our programs to improve. We probably would need some work to just get into the international, not an international market, but to do more work locally to expand our footprint. And so I guess after this, we can have, if anyone is interested in an internship, I'll leave my contact so you can contact me and see how we can start working remotely to grow or to see what you can contribute or what skills you can contribute to the organization. And thank you for asking. So the last question here, assuming greater awareness is established, is the community supportive and engaged in the SDG initiatives? Yes. Communities, normally how they work is when they need to see what you call the WIFM factor, WIIFM, what's in it for me. Once you can show the communities how they benefit, then they will be engaged. And that's typically the same approach we use for our partnerships. So every partner needs to know what their contribution is and how they're going to benefit. So once a community, I'll give an example of a school community where one of the pictures you saw, we went to plant trees. So the women in the community were interested. So they came and later on they told us that they'd like us to come and plant trees around their homes. And with that, we also looked at it as an opportunity to train them on not, because the women in most homes still don't have access to alternative sources of energy, and we mean clean energy. So a lot of homes in Africa still use charcoal, which is taken from firewood. So once they see that once you can give a community an alternative, if you don't want them to cut trees and use firewood, then you give them an alternative. So we train them on how to use biodiesel, or making or to use biogas as well from the cattle they keep and all that. So yes, the community with greater awareness and knowing where and how they can benefit and giving them an alternative, or they're quite engaged in the SDG initiatives that directly affect them. So they're less likely to be engaged in partnerships for, or something like partnerships for greater growth, that's SDG 17, but they're more likely to be engaged in, in decent work and something to do with clean environment, making them climate change in terms of planting trees. So each community has SDGs that directly affect them, and that's how we approach them. So we go to certain communities that their issue is education and not necessarily environment. So that's how we work to support our communities and engage them. Any other question? I think we're done.
Well, I think we're out of time anyway.
1 minute.
Yes, 1 minute over. But thank you so much to everyone for joining us today and for such a wonderful presentation. You truly are a humanitarian, and the work you're doing is phenomenal. And again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Any questions you may have that weren't answered, I am going to put my email in the chat. So feel free, if you think of any questions, to email me and I can get them over and answered for you. And again, this event was recorded, so it will be uploaded. If you have any information that you want to go back to, it will be sent to you tomorrow once all edits are made and everything. So again, thank you everybody for attending and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Good night. It's morning here, so good morning.
Good morning and good night, everyone.
Good morning and good night.
Thank you, Serene.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Sarah.
me.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Ashley.
Bye, Larry. Bye, everybody. Thank you.